Hello everybody, this is my channel of history straight to the point. The idea is to make a summary of the most important themes of world history, specifically European history, and today we are going to start with the French Revolution. First of all, it is important to know what a revolution is. A revolution is a movement to change, to break the status quo of something. In this case, in France, in 1789, before the French Revolution, there was an absolute monarchy. The king was Louis XVI, and he usually squandered the resources of the state. He was accompanied by his young wife, Madame Deficit, who was Marie Antoinette. And they lived, I would say nowadays, a virtual reality, because they lived luxurious lives, but outside the Palace of Versailles, people were starving. We are going to study first the socio-economic causes of this movement, but it is important to take into account that the French Revolution was not a movement of the poor. That is to say, it was not the result of poverty, of misery. Obviously, there was a lot of misery. People were starving in France, but they didn't start the revolution because they didn't have political power. They just followed the bourgeoisie who started the revolution. The first cause of the French Revolution as regards the socio-economic field is the rise of the middle class to a position of extraordinary power. During the years preceding the revolution, that is to say before 1789, the French bourgeoisie, that is to say the people who had a lot of money, had grown to a dominant position in society. They controlled practically every field of society. That is to say, they controlled trade. That's very important because through trade they made more and more money, manufacturing, and also finance. The problem is that they didn't control political power. Political power was in hand of the king, of Louis XVI, of the state. He was the state. He used to say, "L'État c'est moi," and that is to say, he had extraordinary power. But we have to take into account that the movement of the bourgeoisie was becoming more and more powerful, and the king did not realize about that. They were looking for political privileges. Besides, it's important to remember that the bourgeoisie were looked down by the frivolous nobility. That is to say, they produced the money of the country, they paid taxes, and they were looked down by these people because those members of the nobility were at the head of the society. So they started to realize that they had the power. They were conscious that they have the economic power, and they decided that it was time for a revolution. The second cause, opposition to mercantilism. Mercantilism is a system of government intervention to promote the prosperity of the country and to increase the power of the state. The problem in France was that the power of the state was the king. L'État c'est moi, used to say Louis XVI. So he was becoming more and more powerful. And it is also important to take into account that this mercantilism is a system to enhance the national industry. That is to say, they used to limit imports and they oblige merchants to buy from the French colonies the products that they used to in their factories. Another important aspect is that merchants, that is the bourgeoisie, were fed up with mercantilistic policy. That is why they decided it was time for a revolution. The state controlled every aspect of their commercial life. The state fixed prices and wages, and the state obliged the merchants or the industrialists, in this case, to buy raw material from the French colonies. It was very expensive that they were obliged to buy there. They couldn't buy in other places. That is to say, competition was not allowed. So they saw in the possibility of the revolution this chance of getting rid of this mercantilistic policy and to control the political power of the state. The unfair system of privileges is another important aspect to take into account, because before the French Revolution, French society was divided into three states. The first state was composed by the higher clergy and the lower clergy. That is to say, the clergy, the higher and the lower clergy. In the higher clergy, we have cardinal, archbishop, bishops, the most important members of the clergy. And in the lower clergy, the parish, the priests, that is to say, those who were not that important for the Catholic Church. The privileges they had is that they didn't pay taxes. Okay, both of them, the higher clergy lived luxurious lives, and it is important to bear in mind that the member of the higher clergy supported the king, supported absolutism, because they were corrupt and they were happy with their lives. The lower clergy, the only privilege they had was just not to pay taxes. The second state was composed by nobility. It was divided into two sections: the nobles of the sword and the nobles of the robe. The nobles of the sword were those who had inherited the titles from their ancestors, and the nobles of the robe were intellectual people. For example, we have to mention here Montesquieu in this kind, this type of nobility. They didn't pay taxes at all. They lived some of them believed that the only job they had was just to flatter the king. And the third state were the common people, the bourgeoisie and the middle class. They were the ones who supported the economy of the country, because they not only produced the wealth of France, but they only had to pay taxes, and they paid higher taxes, and in some cases they paid all the taxes of the country. So the bourgeoisie and the middle class were fed up with this situation. It is connected with this one, the inadequate system of taxation. The first and second state, the states that we have just mentioned, did not pay taxes at all, or some of them paid a small amount of taxes. But the third state were the ones who paid the taxes. So they were supporting the economy of the country, and they did not receive equal treatment. They were the most important socio-economic causes of the French Revolution.
I was lost in France, in the field.